Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Cindy Woody with another test review for the TExES 268 Principal as Instructional Leader exam. And today we'll be covering Domain 2. This is a big one. Let me show you just how big it really is. So if you can imagine for a moment that this test was worth 100 points, 17 of the points would come directly from Domain 2 concepts covered on the selected response test items, and 25% would come from Domain 2 concepts on the constructed response items, for a total of 42 points out of 100, or 42% of the whole test. It's a really big one. There's no other domain this big. The number 60 over here is, I hope, a helpful number. In our most recent statewide data, 60% of test takers passed this test on the first time. So I'm giving you this number to let you know this is not an easy test, and Domain 2 is a make or break concept or domain framework for you to really grasp. So let's take a quick look at the other domains. Domain 1, we just made a video about, and it's 22% of the total score. And it's all about you aren't the Lone Ranger. You are in this with stakeholders. You must lead the stakeholders into collaborative development of the shared vision, the campus planning, and stakeholder involvement. And then 18% of the test comes from Domain 3, which will be hopefully our next video. And that's all about your role in the teacher. It's really TExES is a lot of it, but your teacher evaluation process and developing this capacity of your staff. It's very similar to Task 2 on PASL if you're working on Task 2, if you're working on your PASL. And then 17% of the test, the items on the test, are from domains 4, 5, and 6 combined. And in the past, this is what we consider to be, or what public considered to be, the primary role of the principal, and especially the assistant principal. We called it the 3 Bs, which isn't really very polite. We said that was books, butts, and buses. I hate to say the word butts, but that's what it was. And you can see that's reflected in executive leadership, strategic operation, and ethics. And yes, those things are still incredibly important. You can't have school without organization and leadership and ethics. But remember that to pass this test, you must think like the name of the test as an instructional leader. So that's why I want you to stick with me on this test. I'm not going to read you all the thought bubbles, but I want you to take a moment, just pause the video and look at this and read the words. But Domain 2 really is for the whole enchilada. This is the big one. That's me in that picture. I'm getting ready to plant set some plants out, and hopefully they're going to grow. But that's what we're doing here is I'm setting out some thoughts for you. Hopefully they're going to grow because you have a lot invested in this test. It's not just a $200 exam. You've got a master's degree, you've got your principal preparation program and all the documents and efforts that you did there. You've got your internship, you'll be doing the PASL, and also your future career rides on passing this exam. So let's get you there. Please stick with me. So we'll start with Domain 2, Competency 3. So there's 2 competencies in Domain 2. On the test, they're not going to be numbered. You don't need to recite them. You don't have to know which competency this came from. But the reason I separate them is because there's 2 different, I'd say, thought containers on Domain 2. So container 1 is Competency 3. This is what the entry-level principal does with students. So where in the past you were a teacher and you worked directly, you were solely responsible in your classroom for the strategies and practices and all the needs being met for your students. Now as the principal, you're this for the whole school, but it's your interaction with students is a little bit different. So this is the one time on the test where it really goes deeply into what the principal does for kids. Now, not that it's not covered in ethics and in the vision and all those other parts, but this is where you switch from thinking like a teacher to thinking like a principal. And that's what this lens is all about. So these are 2 principles here. These are their thought bubbles. These questions that they're asking in their thought bubbles come directly from uh, items that you might expect to see on your 268 exam about levels of engagement. A pre-K student, what would a student in the pre-K want? What about an English 1 student? What are the grade level expectations or the TEKS that I would need to pass to be considered on level, or that I would need to master to be considered on level? And do the teachers know? Have I unpacked those with them? What's a good science lab? When I go into the science lab, what should I be looking for? Do students understand? Like, how can I tell if the students in all of these teachers' classrooms understand? And are the activities that you're using in your lesson plans, are they really aligned with the TEKS and the STAR? And just in general, how's the art program? Because program evaluation is it's also a part of this. And you'll see that I spotlighted 3 keywords or phrases at the bottom: academic, grade level, and social. And we'll be talking more as we go about what those are, but basically academic is the unique needs of each student. So you're talking about, are they needing intervention? Do they need to have maybe do they have an ARD meeting, or they have an LPAC, ESL, or EB needs? Or perhaps they are an advanced student and they need some type of advanced coursework. So that's the academic needs. Grade level means what is expected, like when they say on the STAR test, X% of students were at or above grade level. So grade level is like the watermark, it's the benchmark, the standard, and that's how does the student's performance compare to that. And then social is really SEL, social emotional learning. So you'll see that there's a lot on this test that includes social emotional learning through the lens of the unique needs of each student. So on number 3, this slide, the only purpose for this slide is I want you to understand that bold print asterisk standards are rigorous, and they are priority standards, and they're the ones that you will have more than one question on the test from. It's a guarantee, absolutely, this will be on the test multiple times. The ones that are not bold print may or may not be on the test, and they won't be on there multiple times typically. It's not to say they can't, because obviously the test maker can do whatever they want, and the bank of questions that you pull when you sit down to do your test electronically will be different from the person sitting next to you. But E is the only one on O3 or 003 that's not a priority standard, and that's the one about technology. So we won't dwell on that. Let's start with standard A. And you'll see that I've kind of, normally I'd say grayed out, but I've tauped out maybe or tanned out the ones we're not looking at. And I've got an arrow pointing at the ones that we are. So I've given you a symbol to help you remember what A is about, and it's an elevator speech. So an elevator speech is if you got in an elevator with a person, you rode up a few floors, and you had a chance to say the most important thing. By the time that person got off the elevator, what would you say? That's what an elevator speech is. So if I'm talking about prioritizing instruction and student achievement by understanding, sharing, and promoting a clear definition of high quality instruction based on best practices from recent research, this is you carrying forward domain 1. So when the test makers organized the principal certification standards into domains, they said that this is where domain 1 goes into domain 2. So in domain 1, we created a shared vision, remember? Like you weren't the Lone Ranger. But now that is the thing that drives all the meetings. So when you send out your Monday morning email, or when you have your faculty meeting, when you go into classrooms and you observe, when you have feedback conversations with teachers, these are these clear definitions of high quality instruction that came from domain 1. So you're going to keep first things first. You'll see that throughout the exam. Keep first things first. Okay, domain 2, I'm sorry, domain 2, 003B. I've chosen for this the image of a person who's thinking through all the things that went into making this one idea. So these are all the inputs for all the children's needs. So as the principal, you are the manager and the leader of all the things: PE and music and art and drill team and FFA, as well as English, math, science, social studies, if elementary school, early literacy, handwriting, spelling, like all of the inputs for all of the children's needs. So as the leader, the lead learner or the leader of learning, you see all these commas? You're going to expect to see questions from these different words. So you'll see where you're supposed to have a hand in the development, in the implementation, in the coordination. So when we say coordination, that means like the coordination of services for students' needs, and the evaluation, in the campus co-curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular programs that fulfill academic, developmental, social, and cultural needs. So let me take just a second and explain the difference in curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular programs. I think one of the easiest examples I can give you is an animal science program. So if you were an FFA, if you were an ag teacher, you're not an FFA teacher. If you're an ag teacher, or you're the principal working with the ag teacher, the curriculum are the ag TExES. So if they're the animal science teacher, then the curriculum are the animal science courses. Co-curricular things are things that happen as part of that. So I may be going out and looking at animals. I may be learning lots of different things outside of the classroom, but these are all co-curricular activities. Typically, co-curricular happens during the day. So I may be on field trips, or I may be in the barn. Extracurricular programs are things that not every student has to participate in. So all students participate in co-curricular. Extracurricular is above and beyond by student's choice. You can't force somebody to be in extracurricular programs. So that would be the FFA program. So then the ag teacher becomes the sponsor of the program, which is extracurricular program. That's where you start to see stipends come into play as a principal. So for football, extracurricular is football. The curriculum is the PE or athletics. There's no athletic TEKS. It's what we expect for physical education. So the curriculum is a physical education curriculum. Co-curricular activities are when we're in the gym and we're doing all the activities along with the curriculum. We maybe are going outside, running around the track. We're doing different things. But extracurricular is I've actually made the football team. And now I'm not just taking athletics class, I'm coming after school to practices. I'm going Friday nights or Thursday nights or whatever your night to play football games. So it's a little bit easier to see at the high school level. At the elementary or middle school level, yes, once they start in outside extracurricular activities, yes. But in elementary school, there's not as many questions about extracurricular. Co-curricular are things like field trips. So you'll see questions about that, but there's a balance. So the idea here on 003B is there's a balance that you're coordinating all of these things and that they're purposeful. They're not just a reward. They're not in isolation, or they don't exclude people. Field trips technically are co-curricular, so you shouldn't be leaving students behind on field trips. They should be tied to your curriculum. Only extracurricular things can be avoided or left off of a student's school program. So we're trying to fulfill academic, developmental, social, and cultural needs. And then again, we've got this image of this person thinking about all the inputs that it takes to get the student where they need to be. So for C, again, look at all those commas. This is why Domain 2 is so hard. There's so much in each standard. So you as the principal, you're the facilitator, note the verb, and then skip all the way to what you're facilitating. You're facilitating these things to ensure the scope, sequence, content, and alignment of the curriculum. So here's what they are. They're the planning, implementation, monitoring, and revision. So in the questions, you're going to see the principal sitting in planning meetings. You're going to see the principal in the classroom monitoring implementation. You're going to see the principal monitor the monitoring, if that makes sense. So monitoring can be things like interim assessments, exit tickets, 9-week exams, those kinds of things. You're going to be facilitating the revision of the curriculum. And that gets tricky. We'll talk about that on the next standard, that you're kind of in a way, you're an island, you're your own little executive director of curriculum at your campus on this test. But then they throw in on C the word district. Do you see there? In the collaborative district planning. So you're not an island. You're not the Lone Ranger again, even though we're going to talk about it on D. You are a collaborative member of the district planning team. You have directives from above. You're a collaborative member of the campus planning team. You have directions and directives from your stakeholders. And then you're the leader of the classroom and the individual planning team to make sure that all of these little pieces for teaching and learning fit together and they're all aligned. No pressure. Okay, let's look at D. Now, hopefully, I'm very serious about this image on the left. You see that triangle? By now, in your preparation, you should have covered the CNI, the curriculum and instruction framework, the written, the taught, and the tested curriculum, and how they all align. That the teacher should not be teaching something that's not in the standards and the written curriculum. that the test should not cover things that are not in the standards of written curriculum, and that the test and the standards should be aligned with what the teacher's teaching so that no student gets to the test without having been prepared for the standards by the instruction. So there's a tight alignment. So that is your job, is you have to have a tight alignment of the curriculum with the standards. So in a way, you as the principal have this job. When I was executive director of curriculum, this was my job for the district. C and D was my job. I was supposed to make sure that all these pieces that we have adopted all fit together. But now you're the principal, and it's your job on the campus to make sure that it makes sense for your campus and that you are in those questions that you're modeling that and facilitating that and implementing that. So I'm going to take a second. I'm going to fly through some slides without a lot of discussion to allow you to pause if needed. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing them. This is why. You see on D where it says comma, including college and career readiness standards. You're sitting at home, maybe you're sitting at school, I don't know. Raise your hand if you have spent a tremendous amount of time knowing the college and career readiness standards. Is that a conversation at your school? Because I'm going to be honest and say it really never was a conversation at my school. And it never was a conversation in my principal preparation. But it is specifically mentioned as an asterisk, bold printed standard, a descriptor, as a thing that will be tested multiple times in your test. So just in case you've never looked at them before, I'm not going to tell you to go look at a link because I know you're busy and you may not do that. But I'm going to take screenshots. I'm going to put them on the next, I don't know, I think it's like 7 or 8 slides. And I want you to pause and read them if you've never seen them before. So here we go. Ready? This one's all about writing. You can expect to be held accountable for knowing what this is. It's pretty generic. This one's all about reading. And you'll notice reading is so long, I believe it goes into the next slide. See, there's more about reading. And if you haven't picked something for your PASL task yet, for your problem you're going to work on task 1, reading's pretty good. It's pretty generic. It covers every single subject area. Okay, this one's all about speaking and listening. Again, that's all across the content. Here's another big one. This is where math starts. Numeric reasoning. Algebraic reasoning. Oh my word. Algebraic reasoning. We're obsessed with algebra. I used to teach courses that involve these things, so you can't have enough understanding of this to be too much. Here's geometric and spatial reasoning. I'm going to struggle pronouncing this word. You can just make fun of me if you want to. I'm going to say it. Probabilistic reasoning and statistical reasoning. There's the rest of statistical reasoning and functions. And there's a separate one on problem solving and reasoning. And then we have communication and representation. And another one on connections, which is also communication and representation. But this is that real world connection. So let's review on 003 student needs. Recap. 003 is about how you keep the focus on meeting all students' needs. Best practices in instruction, program reviews. You will have questions on the test that says such and such program, you're reviewing it. Is it still necessary? Is it useful? Is it doing what it ought to do? Data-based decision making, alignment of written, taught, and tested curriculum, staying true to the rigor and intent of grade level and content standards. So now we're moving on to teacher effectiveness. Take a moment to look at competency 4. To me, I think teacher effectiveness and student achievement down at the bottom is all part of the same one. I think 004 is a little bit more intuitive for us because you don't have to know so much specific stuff about each grade level, each elementary, middle school, high school, special education, gifted and talented. English as a second language, which, by the way, they still call it English as a second language on the test. I don't know. They may have switched to emergent bilingual. I'd be curious to know if that's true, but the standards still call it ESL. So you may see that on the test. The test doesn't always keep up. Okay, so we're looking at getting into classrooms, coaching teachers, guiding unit planning, knowing how to use data, closing achievement gaps, developing staff capacity. These should be a little bit more familiar to you. So again, you can take time to read these thought bubbles. This is a typical conversation that Domain 4 would expect the principal leader to have. So what it might look like. So the teacher is the person on the left. Why didn't they get it? I taught it. So much data, it's hard to know where to start. And then here's the wise principal. In this domain, you're very wise. What does the exit ticket data show? How are you going to group students? When I was in your classroom, some students seemed confused. So this competency is all about the principal's ability to help teachers align lesson and unit plans, instruction and assessment data, standards, teaching materials, student ability levels, intervention, etc., to create optimal conditions for student learning. And you'll see I've spotlighted 3 different words or phrases at the bottom. So now we're into monitor and assess, effectiveness, and achievement. I'll only give you this slide to show you that everything in 004 is bold printed and asterisk. So roll your shirt sleeves up, get ready, we're going to dig in. Don't quit. You can take a break, but come back to this. This is for the whole enchilada. So 004A, the image that I've given you, the icon, is a clipboard with real data on it. Because this means you're in everywhere, not just the classroom, you're in everything. You're monitoring instruction and providing feedback. So you are in classroom, CA. You're monitoring instruction by being in the classrooms. You're observing instruction. You're at grade level or department or team meetings, and you're providing evidence-based feedback to improve instruction. So remember, the evidence that you get isn't just from doing walkthroughs. You're listening to teacher conversations. You're looking for student data or student examples. So in the grade level meetings and the questions, it may be that all the teachers brought exemplars or representative student samples, work samples, to the meeting, and you're all discussing what the students actually did and what that meant and how it impacts how you should make changes to instruction. Got it? So there's a word, monitor instruction, provide feedback. Okay, on B, I gave you suitcases. Because when you go somewhere, you pack your suitcase, and when you come back, you have to unpack it. And to pack it and to unpack it, you have to organize. There's a lot of thought that goes into packing and unpacking. So on B, we're going to unpack and organize the curriculum. So we're going to analyze the curriculum collaboratively. Remember, we, the principal and the staff, to guide teachers in aligning content across grades. We're going to ensure that the curriculum scopes and sequences meet the particular needs of student populations. And then there's your commas: sociological, linguistic, and other factors. So be prepared. You kind of, I think, know the sociological. A lot of that is in your back to school compliance training. You get a lot of training on those kinds of things. The linguistic, if you aren't working with a subject area where you routinely have linguistic expectations, if you're not part of the LPAC committee, or you're not doing a language arts class, or you're not in the early years where you've had to take the STR test, we're going to talk about a tip to get you there in just a few minutes, because you will absolutely have some questions about linguistic. There it is, listed in bold print with an asterisk. And then I've given you an example of, I hope these look like adults in this case. They are going through lots of different kinds of student data. So multiple forms, monitor use of data, multiple forms of data. You've got your data room, you've got your reports you can pull, you have individualized student goal setting charts. You might be walking through a classroom in the questions where students are filling out their own little chart to monitor their fluency or whatever. So on C, monitors and ensures staff use of multiple forms of student data to inform instruction and intervention decisions that maximizes instructional effectiveness and student achievement. So if you've started preparing for your constructive response questions, you will see these. These are actually the pieces that you have in your practices for constructive response items. And you'll also see real exemplars, snippets of real exemplars on the test. So your goal here is to figure out if your teachers know what to do with all this data. So they say all this water and not a drop to drink. I think that's how teachers feel sometimes. So your idea is you're supposed to clear out the cobwebs and get them to where they understand the trends and what they're supposed to do, all the way drilled down to the individual student. And then I've done this little image for student growth to show how one student is supposed to grow, and also how you can have different students in the same grade level or at different points. So D is all about student growth, promotes instruction that supports the growth of individual students and student groups, supports educational ethics, and works to reduce the achievement gap. So you can see here there is a gap. If you consider that first little bud there is a student and the last one is a different student, there's a gap between them. Or that could be groups of students. It could be demographic groups, or it could be just different groups of students who responded differently on individual items on an exit ticket. So it goes all the way from the big social, ethnic and racial groups that you have to monitor, the gender groups, the economic groups, all the way down to the individual, 4 students sitting around the same teacher table, that type of drill down. And then here's more about unpacking, but this is the opposite way. It's putting the pieces together. So they're all unpacked, but we're putting them back together. So we're going to support the staff in developing the capacity and time to collaboratively and individually use classroom formative and summative assessment data to inform effective instructional practices and interventions. So I don't see as many commas this time. So I see 2 types of data, formative data and summative data. They love their exit tickets. They love their formative data. And summative data, you'll see a lot with the STAR data, but also benchmarking and just some of the 9 weeks exam, that kind of thing. And then to inform effective instructional practices and interventions. So some is about the teaching itself, and some is about the reteaching. So let's get down into this. We'll review just for a moment, take a moment to look back over the recap of 004. And I want to mention now, this video is not specifically going to go much into the 4 constructive response items, but I lifted this slide directly from another video I have where we compare the 4 constructive response items. And I want to ask you, after listening to this video so far, do you see the overlap? So in CR1, we have a post-conference coaching conversation. Look at what we're doing with the teacher. We've been given a lesson plan, an exit ticket, an exemplar, student responses, video observation, and you're coaching up the teacher. Does some of that come from Domain 2? Absolutely. Some also comes from Domain 3. In CR2, we're given a unit plan, standards, state star released items, exit ticket, resources, and you're identifying improvement needed in the unit plan with a group of teachers or an individual teacher. 100% of that is from Domain 2. On Domain 3, analyzing data for reteaching. You're given student data, an exit ticket on other assessment items, a teacher-made reteaching plan, and your task is to coach that teacher through, or the group of teachers, through analyzing the data before they reteach. 100% of that is from Domain 2. And then constructive response 4, a plan for school improvement. So you have school-wide data sources, you have stakeholder feedback, you have needs assessments, you have culture. Your task is to develop an improvement plan. So that's the one that kind of puts together Domain 1, Domain 2, and Domain 3. It gets also into 4, 5, and 6, but 4, 5, and 6 technically aren't measured on CR4 or anywhere else on the CR items. So just know that if you don't know Domain 2, you're not going to pass. You've got to get this. So take your time. Here we go. I want you to stop for a minute, pause the video, and see what connections you can make to your own T-test, progress monitoring, TIA, and STAR experiences. If you have a lot, if you have a little, the more you have, the better you're going to do on this test. The less you have, the more you know you need to prepare to do better on this test. If you feel weak overall in the domain leading learning, what steps are you taking to grow? And might I suggest use your PASL, use your internship, grow in the real world and real life learning. Be the one on your campus who trails the teacher, the principal around, goes to data meetings, asks questions, studies the TEKS at home on your own, visits classrooms. Okay, so now let's jump into some actual exam items. I've given the link where you can find these. These are in the content, the study guide for the TExES 268 on the Pearson website. You can type that all in if you need to. So here's the question. After reviewing the campus-wide needs assessment, showing that many English learners, see, I told you there's going to be questions about this. Many English learners struggle with reading comprehension due to their current level of vocabulary development. A middle school principal and teacher work collaboratively to implement an initiative to revise district curriculum to increase and improve vocabulary instruction. So this should answer a question back earlier when we talked about you were like your own little curriculum and instruction director for your campus, and yet you still had district initiatives. This is how that works. So it may seem like this big disconnect. How can you have a district required curriculum, but then you revise it for your campus? This is how. And also, when we talked about college and career readiness TEKS, standards, do you see those in here? They're here. And the linguistic piece. So you're going to identify the 3 program elements for effective vocabulary instruction that the school should include in its curriculum revisions. So in the actual picture, there's 5 choices followed by a graphic of 3 empty boxes when you have the sample on the Pearson practice test. And that's very much like what you should expect to see on the real 268 test. So look at the answers. There's a in-depth explanation in the handbook about why these are the right answers. But the correct answers are the first 3. Embed vocabulary instruction in engaging content. Focus on a thorough understanding of a small set of high utility academic words and incorporate a structured writing process to assess and promote the use of targeted words. So you'll see overall, anytime that you see something about language learners, the goal is to give them some words they can use in lots of places. So those are high frequency words or high utility words. And then you're going to have them immediately set about using them in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So the reason that we don't pick the choice 4 and 5 or D and E here is study a multitude of words. No, a new learner can't handle a multitude of words. And then the next one, limit explicit word learning strategies to advanced students studying challenging tests. No, they're not ready for that yet. So use common sense, stick to that idea there. If you're not a pro at this, just remember, overall, the big idea for any linguistic question is that we're going to start with the power words, the big words that get you a lot of ways. We're going to get into those heavy hitting words. We're going to repeat them in practice. We're going to teach them explicitly. And we're going to incorporate them in writing. Okay, look at this one. A principal coaches a second grade teacher who is struggling to determine whether the expectations and work products of a writing lesson taught the day before are at an appropriate level of rigor. So that's a big one. Remember, when you watch those constructive response items, I always tell you, be prepared to talk about rigor. The level of rigor just means what the standard, how hard the standard is, like where the standard expects the student to be able to perform. Place the following coaching actions in order from first to last to best help the teacher determine what adjustments may be needed. Next are 4 statements followed by a graphic with 4 empty boxes labeled first to last. So that's what it looks like on the test. So your job would be to take all 4 of these and put them in order. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I think those are hard questions. So let's take a look at what they did here and how this applies to all answers, all questions like this. So the answer order is you start with the second one there, B or 2. Review the grade level TEKS knowledge and skills the lesson is intended to address. So always in any question like this, start with the standards. So if you're given the choice in ordering, the first thing is start with the standards and the last will always be check for alignment. So the second step would be the one listed here in the fourth spot, or D. Determine whether exit ticket questions, so I guess they're assuming we already have the exit ticket, whether the exit ticket questions for the targeted TEKS lead to the rigor that is demonstrated in the state mandated assessment questions for the next tested grade level. So the exit tickets that the teacher is teaching, the exit ticket questions for the lesson the teacher is teaching today, for the targeted TEKS. So we have the clear target. Do they align to the rigor that's demonstrated on the STAR released items or the STAR questions for the next tested grade level? So that would, first we have the standards. Then we're going to see if our standards are aligned in our exit ticket questions and whether we're going to be able to get to where we need to be. And then the next one is C, or number 3. Then you create the exemplar, which is the answers that you hope students come up with, that defines the ideal student response to the exit ticket question. So if my students were all on track, if I'm in second grade and all my students are going to be on track to be ready for third grade expectations when we're done, what do they need to be able to write when I give them this exit ticket? And then the last one is listed first. It's A. Ensure the knowledge and skills needed to create an exemplar response are included in the lesson's activities. So that's where you go back and you check what you're teaching. So she's trying, the whole point, he or she, the principal is trying to coach the teacher in determining whether the expectations and work products of a lesson already taught. So we're going back through the lesson taught yesterday. So the kids all wrote something, then they did the exit ticket. Is this aligned to what they're going to need to be able to write next year in third grade? Did we hit the mark? And then let's look at one like this. Sometimes you have one that are from, they call them clustered questions. So, or clustered scenarios. So they'll have a scenario, they give you a lot of information. So it saves you time to not have to read so much information if they just keep asking questions about the same data set. So in this one, which of the following is the primary outcome of systematically implementing and monitoring the instructional data described in key point 2 of the principal's facilitation notes? So you can see this whole thing, just like you can on the question before this. You can see this whole thing and elaborate discussion of the answers if you go to the study guide link below. But we're going to do it without the point 2. So the answer to this question is C. The review of data sources and facilitation of teachers' discussions will identify gaps and improve instructional practices to better support student learning needs. So which of the following is the primary outcome of systematically implementing and monitoring the instructional data? So when this person's looking at the review of the data, the goal is the teacher will say, oh, I see gaps. Oh, thank you, wise principal. I see how I need to change my instruction to better support the learning needs. The goal will never be about A, that we're trying to just get data for the leadership team, or B, that we're trying to get data for the district administration, or D, that we're trying to get data for stakeholders. So when you're answering these questions, yes, we're going to share data with stakeholders. Yes, the district is certainly going to want to gather data from the campuses. And certainly the school leadership team is going to want multiple data points. But the goal, the primary goal, is to get right down to the teacher and the students. And then another one, I believe from the same data set. Miss Washington, so that's the principal in this one. Miss Washington recognizes the need for an ungraded approach to assessing and documenting student progress. Which 2 of the following principal actions improve on the previous principal's approach to measuring student progress? So they've given you some data, and you can see if you look down through it that the previous principal used only a 9-week STAR benchmark to get data. So the principal would have had 3 data points for every student. The end of the first 9 weeks, the end of the second, the end of the third. So I say an ungraded, we need an upgraded approach. Sorry about that. So we're trying to do better. This campus is in need of improvement. We're trying to do a better job of doing what? Assessing and documenting student progress. So we're going to have to find 2 things that help with the goal of assessing and documenting student progress. And we're going to have to do better than once every 9 weeks. That's what we know. So the answers are A and C. So on A, we're going to implement interim assessments to evaluate what the students have learned during every grading period. And C, we're going to disaggregate assessment data and assessment questions to determine an action plan for all student groups. So we're not trying to do B to make it more rigorous. We're not trying to establish and communicate more rigorous goals to students before they complete the benchmark assessments. That's not what this question is about. And we're not going to do D, side-by-side comparisons of our benchmarks with other campuses, because we're not talking about that. We're talking about us doing better this year compared to how we did last year. And we're not going to incorporate a diagnostic and end of the year assessment to better capture the range of student growth, because the question says we're trying to assess and document student progress. So progress and growth are a little bit different. We talk about progress, that means how are we getting better a little bit every day? We talk about growth, we're talking about what has happened over time to get me from point A to point B. The same thing, but a little bit different. So I like to say spill the tea. That means just tell me what you know. Give me the down low. So let's start by spilling the tea, give you a tip here. And all of the answers that you pick and all the questions that they give you, you need to consider who is doing the work. In these questions, the principal should be the guide on the side and not the sage on the stage. So the mindset is for learning and planning alignment, lesson planning and alignment, for lesson planning and alignment. The teacher is typically the one doing the work. So when you choose your answers, you're choosing the answer, well, the teacher's doing the work or doing the learning, and they're guided by a principal's questions and suggestions. And the principal's not telling the teacher what to do in most cases, because that kind of violates the concept of coaching. This is a coaching mindset. You're going to avoid answers where the principal's doing things other than preparing data analysis or organizing feedback. So it's almost like the principal's not working, even though if you've ever spent a moment in the principal's shoes, I mean, it's full-time work. But you're going to pick the kinds of work or actual tasks that you see the principal doing is they're going to facilitate. They're going to set up a meeting. They're going to come into the meeting. They're going to bring data. They're going to bring their analysis. They're going to provide feedback. They're preparing pre-conferences and post-conferences and calendars and those kinds of things. But they're not actually doing the work of redesigning the instructional groups for interventions. That kind of thing is where the teacher's doing the work. And then ask yourself who benefits. So choose the answers if you're stuck and you're trying to eliminate distractors. Choose the answers that benefit students in getting personalized instruction and or that help teachers grow in their understanding of good instruction. So the mindset is if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. So if you do all the work and the answers and the teacher doesn't have to do the thinking, then they will always come to you to do their thinking and you will never be able to let them be turned loose to do the work. So you're trying to grow their capacity. You're going to avoid answers that surely benefit external stakeholders. So absolutely, like we talked about earlier, central office needs to know things, stakeholders, parents, family members, students, they all need to know things. But in domain 2, we're focusing mostly on the teacher. What kind of strategies are preferred? So some people get really hung up because the standards use the word strategies, and they're looking for who was the person? I can almost call his name. One of the big time names that made a big book was Selling Strategies, and it was the top strategies of 1,000 things or 100 things you could do, the best strategies. They're not looking for that type of specifics. The mindset the teachers use, the test makers use, comes from Bambrick and Centoyo's work, and I'll give you that reference in just a minute in the book list. But they're looking for things like leverage leadership and getting better faster. And let me just give you a quick tip. Go to Amazon. Google leverage leadership. Read the table of contents and be prepared to be wow. The same thing for getting better faster. All of the quick in a nutshell things are in the table of contents and they're free. It's like a free preview of the book. So whether you have the book or not, you can pause this video and go to Amazon right now. Excuse me. I feel like a lady that swallowed a fly. You are looking for team meetings as strategies. So meetings that have unit plans that align TEKS, the R, exit tickets, and instruction, and that's the order. The data from here and state. So when I mean this, what I'm saying is, in the team meetings, when you're working with unit plans, and this goes for the constructive response too, you're going to start with the TEKS. If you have the option of star data, align the star rigor and the TEKS rigor next. You're going to see how that rigor is portrayed in the released items. And then you're going to look at the exit ticket to see if it matches the TEKS and if it matches the star. If not, you either have an alignment or a rigor issue. That's why when I do my constructive response videos, I talk about these are home run phrases. These words cannot lose. There's going to be an alignment or rigor issue in almost all of them, or an explicit instruction issue. Then instruction, that's what I'm talking about. So if the instruction doesn't match with, maybe they've got the best TEKS, the best star results, the best exit ticket analysis, but then they're not teaching that stuff. You've probably been the product of that in your classes. You probably have, if you have children of your own, you've had a child who's come home and taken a test that they weren't prepared for and has complained about it. So match it. That's the explicit instruction part. And then when you're talking about pulling data, you're going to be comparing mostly in your tests data from here, wherever here is. They'll tell you what your school setting is, and data from the state. You're typically not going to be comparing campus to campus to see how you're lining up against other campuses in the district. And then classroom. The principal does walkthroughs, gives feedback and coaching, and the teacher adjusts. Okay, so that's going to typically be what you see is the teacher. It's so weird how they always have the principal set up as the wise one and the teacher set up as, oh, I'm so grateful for your wisdom, madam or sir, principal. But that's how it is on this test, and just wrap your mind around that. The principal is going to be in the classrooms, in the meetings, is going to listen. You're going to know everything. You're going to have this vast tool and knowledge. You're going to give feedback on what you saw, and you're going to give coaching, and then you're going to expect the teacher to monitor what you're saying and adjust. We'll talk about that more when we do the domain 3. That's what I'm going to say here is domain 3, the whole POP cycle. POP stands for pre-observation, observation, post-conference, or post-conference observation, post-observation conference. All of those things will be covered in a separate video. And then the data. And so remember, I really do think I swallowed a fly. The principal helps look at multiple data sources. The principal helps teachers understand how to do item analysis or item analyses, find misunderstandings, and form intervention groups. So that's the goal when there's lots of data sources, is this wise principal is in there with the teachers. They're looking at items to see. So this is a little tip for you. When you're just overwhelmed in the test and they give you these bunches of data, look to see, is there one item where the students were all over the place? So that means they didn't have a clear understanding. So like a 17% pick A and 25% pick B and 25% pick C and everybody else picked D, and the answer was A. So that just tells you that there's an issue with instruction. If all the students pick the wrong answer, there's an issue with instruction. And if hardly any students pick the wrong answer, it may be that that's an individualized need. So that's what I'm talking about, where they find the misunderstandings and then they form intervention groups. The goal is to find out what needs whole group intervention and what needs small group intervention or individualized intervention. And then here's a tip on the order of how you should choose when you're ordering the items. There's lots of order these things. The order goes from assessment to analysis to action to systems. So by that, I mean there's some type of assessment, whether it's everybody in sixth grade math took the same benchmark test, or everybody in eighth grade U.S. history or social studies did the same exit ticket. Now we're sitting around and we're analyzing all of this data, or maybe it's just one teacher's data, one teacher, one principal. And now we're going to find out what the action is, which is typically some type of reteach or regroup, reworking the unit plan. And then the last thing is that impacts systems. So you will see some systems questions on the test. So how does the principal make sure that in the future that all of sixth grade or that all of English 1 or whatever, that we've made sure that our systems are in place for the curriculum to spiral or whatever is indicated by the data. Here's another tip. What if you have no background? Wah, wah, wah. Sad trombone. So I do have a lot of candidates who talk to me about test anxiety. And sometimes the test anxiety comes from this. They think, well, I've only taught pre-kindergarten, or I've only taught government to high school seniors. How could I possibly be expected to know it all? Well, guess what? Nobody knows it all. There are 0 candidates who have actually done it all. And you know more than you think. You're going to be certified to be a principal at any level for any town in Texas, any size school, any kind of demographics. So we're preparing you for that by certifying that you understand the standards. That's it. You understand the standards. You've mastered the basics. So here's a mindset. Let go. Remove the distractors that have other people solving the problem for the person who has the issue. Solve every issue at the lowest level. So that means if there is a parent involved, see if you can facilitate a parent conference with the teacher. If there is a stakeholder involved, same thing. If the teacher is involved and it's about student data, see if you can transfer the ownership of the problem to the teacher. The principal is there to act as a guide and a patient, knowledgeable thought partner. So when you're trying to choose between, figure out which one is the patient, knowledgeable thought partner. That doesn't mean your partner never unloads the dishwasher, right? There are times where your patient, knowledgeable thought partner takes action and does something helpful. So don't be afraid to have them doing something helpful, like organizing the meeting or printing out the data and having the analysis ready. And here's another tip. Try to think like the PPR exam. Focus on the things being assessed and set aside personal stuff. So sometimes when people get stuck on their PPR, they'll reach out and they'll talk to me. The PPR stands for Professional Practices and Responsibilities. So I always tell them, if you're struggling on a PPR exam, you're probably thinking too conservatively. Think in a broader, more liberal mindset. Set aside personal stuff. Think about the beautiful world and what you can do and how everything is in place to be successful. No negative things. And then tip, backwards design. If you're ordering steps, start with the TExES and end with assuring the alignment. We talked about that a little bit already, and the way it is tested. So we go first from the written to how it's assessed to how it's taught. And that's how we design, that's how we order the steps. And then here's a little cheat. If you think you stink at early literacy, go watch some of the videos for the STR test, the Science of Teaching reading, not radio, the Science of Teaching Reading videos. There's lots of them. Just pick a short one and watch one, and you'll see really quickly some of the basic things. But you do need to know something about early literacy. The STR has now been embedded as something that the principal needs to understand on the 268. So take a minute if you haven't passed that test or weren't prepared in early literacy. And then I want to show you this little thing here. So you may be panicked that you don't know the TEKS. And believe it or not, I actually have had people talk about trying to memorize the TEKS because we do have some real overachievers in our field. Maybe you're one of them. If the TEKS are specific to the question, you will be provided with the grade level or subject and the actual wording of the TEKS. You do not need to have TEKS memorized. So it says an elementary principal, this is an actual test. You can see the link there from the practice exam. The elementary principal observes a second grade teacher for 30 minutes during a science lab. The principal sees the following information displayed on the board. And see where the gold arrow is pointing? The 2.5 means second grade, standard 5, descriptor A. Classify matter by physical properties, including shape, and it's got the list. I'm not going to read all that to you. As part of the standard observation protocol, the principal asks 2 questions near the end of the lesson. What are you learning about today? And receives confused looks from both students. So it talks about a standard observation protocol. That's a Bambrick-Santoyo thing that when you go into the classroom, and most schools do have this, you have something you're supposed to do as the principal when you go in. So this principal is working at a school where he or she is expected to ask 2 questions near the end of the lesson. Tell me what you learned about. And so from these 2 students, and you know they always pick the ones you don't want them to pick as a teacher, they were neither one able to answer the question. So the principal plans to work with the teacher to take steps to improve students' understanding of expectations from the lesson. And you're going to order steps. So just know that you're going to pay careful attention to where the principal is and what the principal plans to do with the TEKS info. But the TEKS themselves are not going to be a deal breaker for you. They're there. Okay, here's a book list. I'm not going to read these. And the slides look just alike. So if you want to take a picture, I've done them as list 1, list 2. This comes straight from TEA. These are the books that they used, or the sources that they used when they prepared what went on this test. So if you want to read or skim or listen, there you go. And then my parting words to you. I used a horse and buggy here. Number 1 is hitch your horse up and get that wagon rolling. There's not going to be a less busy time. Don't wait. Get started. Number 2 is put your phone on the charger and walk away. Doom scrolling is not going to get you to your destination. Number 3 is harness that nag. So in the horse world, a nag is an old beaten down horse, but we all know what it means to nag people. Use your calendar to plan your test prep, reading, and testing window today. Set your calendar reminders so you actually get this annoying reminder on your calendar that today you're supposed to do whatever. You're going to watch a video, you're going to read a book, you're going to organize, you're going to go to test prep, you're going to actually sign up, you're going to pay your money, that you're going to take your test 5 days out, 3 days out, whatever. And then ask your most annoying friend to nag you about it. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Sometimes your best friend is your most annoying friend. I get my mom to nag me about things, or I'll get my husband to nag me about it. Please just keep asking me about it. It's going to drive us both crazy, but ask me anyway. And then take it seriously. If you know how to do the things that the test is assessing, you're truly on your way to greatness. So I know we all want to complain about how hard this test is and how much is covered on it, but this test really is the whole enchilada. This is the real thing that you're going to have to do as a principal. So use this as an opportunity, and your internship too. Number 5, make your brain do its thing. And I wrote, you really can lift your big toes. So right now I'm doing some physical therapy for my feet. I broke my feet down all those years of walking on concrete and eating the wrong things, and sitting at my desk. I can just list a list of things. And now I'm doing physical therapy. And when I first started, my therapist said, raise your big toes. And I said, well, I can't. And she said, you can. Your brain says you can't. But once your brain says you can, you can. So your horse really can pull this heavy wagon. Once your brain says you can, you can. And guess what? I can lift my toes now and wave at you. So there you go. It really can happen. The last thing is, this journey is totally worth it in the end. Somebody asked me that yesterday in a Zoom panel. Was it worth it? Yes. It's hard work. Being a principal is messy work. Getting there and being there is exhausting. It's also life-changing for you and everyone around you. So begin with the end in mind. Be the principal that you want to be. You've got this. So thank you for listening almost an hour. Thank you for liking and subscribing to this video. Hope to have Domain 3 ready for you very soon.